Today, we're exploring every World War II fighter that was basically a death trap for the pilots who flew them. Starting with number 1, Lag-3, Soviet Union, 1941. Built in the Soviet Union, as fighter production scrambled to meet the German invasion of 1941, the Lag-3 was constructed almost entirely from wood laminate to save scarce aluminum for other programs. Deployed along the Eastern Front, it was meant to match Luftwaffe fighters in the desperate early battles for Soviet airspace. Its heavy wooden airframe made it sluggish in climbs and turns, while control response lagged dangerously behind faster German opponents. Soviet pilots nicknamed it the varnish-guaranteed coffin, a bitter pun on its factory designation because so many who flew it did not return. Engine fires and structural fatigue added to the losses, and its poor maneuverability meant pilots often could not escape a fight once engaged. Entire squadrons were decimated before the aircraft was gradually replaced. Its failures pushed Soviet designers toward the far more capable Lavochkin La-5 that followed. Number 2, Brewster F-2A Buffalo, United States, 1939. Designed in the United States as the Navy's first monoplane fighter, the Buffalo was sent to Finland, Britain, and the Pacific to face increasingly modern opposition. Overweight from added armor and equipment never accounted for in its original design, it struggled to climb and turn against nimble Japanese Zeros over Singapore and Malaya. Its landing gear was notoriously fragile, collapsing during routine carrier landings even without combat damage. Pilots dreaded engaging enemy fighters in it, knowing their aircraft could neither outrun nor outmaneuver them. At the Battle of Midway, Marine squadrons flying Buffaloes suffered catastrophic losses, with most shot down in minutes. Survivors described it afterward as a death sentence with wings. Only in Finnish hands, flown against less advanced Soviet aircraft, did the Buffalo perform adequately, proving the design's failure was contextual as much as mechanical. Number 3, Breda BA-88 Lince, Italy, 1939. Italy's Breda BA-88 first appeared as a fast heavy fighter and ground attack aircraft, setting speed records that promised real combat potential. Sent to North Africa in 1940 to support operations against British forces, it failed almost immediately under desert conditions. Sand degraded engine performance so severely that loaded aircraft struggled to leave the runway, and several crashed on takeoff before ever reaching the front. Italian commanders quickly grounded the type, stripping flyable airframes of engines and weapons and staking them out as decoys to draw Allied bombing raids away from real targets. Pilots who had trained on it considered their assignment to squadrons flying the Lince a professional dead end, since the aircraft rarely completed a single operational sortie. Its failure became a case study in how performance figures achieved under ideal test conditions can collapse entirely in real combat environments. Number 4, Bell P-39 Airacobra, United States, 1941. The American P-39 Airacobra introduced an unusual layout, with its engine mounted behind the cockpit and a cannon firing through the propeller hub, and was used extensively in the Pacific and by Soviet forces on the Eastern Front. Its center of gravity, shifted rearward by the engine placement, made it prone to entering a violent, unrecoverable flat spin with little warning. American pilots in the Pacific feared this tendency more than enemy fire, since recovery was often impossible below a few thousand feet. Numerous training and combat losses were attributed directly to this flaw before pilots learned to avoid the conditions that triggered it. Lacking a turbocharger, it also performed poorly at high altitude, forcing American units to relegate it to low-level work, while Soviet pilots, flying it mainly at low altitude against ground targets, found it more survivable. Its reputation in American service never recovered from its spin behavior. Number 5, Messerschmitt Me 210, Germany, 1941. Germany intended the Me 210 as a heavy fighter and successor to the aging Bf-110, meant to serve as a fast strike and reconnaissance aircraft across occupied Europe. Rushed into production before flight testing was complete, it displayed severe longitudinal instability, snapping into unpredictable pitching motions that caught pilots off guard during ordinary maneuvers. Several prototypes and early production aircraft were lost to crashes before the fault was understood, and the Luftwaffe briefly halted the entire program while investigators traced the cause to the short fuselage and wing design. Pilots assigned to early units openly distrusted the aircraft, aware that a routine turn could become fatal. The delay cost Germany critical time and resources at a stage of a war when neither could be spared. Later automatic leading-edge slats improve handling, but by then the redesigned Me 410 had effectively replaced it in frontline service. Number 6. Westland Whirlwind, United Kingdom, 1940. Britain's Westland Whirlwind was conceived as a heavily armed, twin-engine fighter capable of both bomber interception and low-level strike missions over occupied France. Pilots who flew it often praised its handling and firepower, but the aircraft was let down entirely by its Rolls-Royce Peregrine engines, which proved chronically unreliable and difficult to maintain in the field. Squadrons frequently found aircraft grounded for engine faults rather than lost to enemy action, undermining operational readiness throughout its short service life. Spare parts grew scarce as Rolls-Royce prioritized Merlin production for more numerous aircraft, leaving ground crews unable to keep the Whirlwind fleet flying. Several were lost to engine failure rather than combat, a frustrating and preventable form of attrition. Ultimately, only 2 squadrons ever operated it, and production ended after fewer than 200 were built, a promising design abandoned because of its power plant rather than its airframe. Number 7. Hawker Typhoon, United Kingdom, 1941. Developed in Britain as a high-speed interceptor and later repurposed as a ground attack aircraft over Normandy and Northern Europe, the Typhoon entered service with serious, unresolved problems. Its tail sections suffered structural failures in flight, with the empennage occasionally separating entirely from the fuselage, killing pilots with no warning and no chance to bail out. Early Napier Sabre engines were also prone to failure and produced exhaust fumes that leaked into the cockpit, causing carbon monoxide poisoning that left pilots disoriented or unconscious at the controls. Dozens of aircraft were lost to these combined faults before reinforced tail structures and improved sealing corrected them. Pilots in early squadrons flew missions aware that mechanical failure, not the enemy, was their greatest threat. Once the flaws were addressed, the Typhoon became a formidable ground attack platform, but its early service record remained scarred by needless, preventable deaths. Number 8. Vought F-4U Corsair, United States, 1942. The American Corsair arrived with a distinctive gull-wing design and a long nose that gave it exceptional speed, intended for carrier operations across the Pacific. That long nose, however, blocked forward visibility so severely during landing approach that early Navy pilots struggled to judge their position relative to the carrier deck. Its stiff landing gear oleo struts caused the aircraft to bounce unpredictably on touchdown, and a tendency for the left wing to stall abruptly at low speed sent many aircraft into the sea or into the carrier's own barriers. Losses during carrier qualification were so frequent that the Navy initially barred it from carrier duty, assigning it instead to Marine Corps land bases in the Pacific. Pilots nicknamed it the Ensign Eliminator for the toll it took on inexperienced aviators. Only after modified gear, a raised seat, and spoiler to control the stall were added did it become carrier-capable and eventually one of the war's most respected fighters. Number 9. Messerschmitt Me 163 Komet, Germany, 1944. Germany's Me 163 Komet was a rocket-powered interceptor built to climb at extraordinary speed and destroy Allied bombers over the Reich before they could be intercepted by conventional fighters. Its rocket fuel, a combination of highly concentrated hydrogen peroxide and hydrazine-based compounds, was so volatile that a hard landing, a fuel leak, or even minor structural damage could trigger a catastrophic explosion. Pilots dissolved in these chemical reactions if the tanks ruptured, and ground crews handling the fuel faced similar risks. Its unpowered landing on a retractable skid was itself dangerous, with many aircraft damaged or destroyed simply returning from a mission, regardless of enemy contact. Flight time under rocket power lasted only minutes, leaving pilots to glide home through contested skies in an aircraft with no propulsion and no room for error. More Komets were lost to fuel accidents and landing mishaps than to Allied guns, making it feared as much by its own operators as by the bomber crews it hunted. Number 10. Nakajima Ki 44 Shoki, Japan, 1942. Japan's Ki 44 Shoki was designed as a dedicated high-speed interceptor to counter Allied bombers over the home islands and occupied territories, trading maneuverability for climb rate and speed. Its high wing loading made it notoriously difficult to land, with a fast approach speed that left little margin for error on Japan's shorter wartime airstrips. Many losses came not from air combat, but from landing accidents involving inexperienced pilots transitioning from more forgiving aircraft. Experienced units respected its climb and diving performance, yet training squadrons dreaded it, since stall behavior at low speed could snap the aircraft into a spin with little altitude to recover. Because of these handling demands, only pilots with considerable experience were assigned to Shoki units, limiting how widely Japan could deploy an otherwise capable interceptor. Its reputation as an unforgiving aircraft for average pilots meant it never achieved the numbers or influence its performance on paper suggested it deserved. Number 11. Messerschmitt Me 262, Germany, 1944. The world's first operational jet fighter, Germany's Me-262, possessed a decisive speed advantage over any Allied piston-engine aircraft deployed in the war's final year to intercept bomber formations. Its Junkers Jumo engines, however, were built with inferior alloys due to wartime material shortages, giving them an operational life of only a few flying hours before catastrophic failure became likely, including in-flight fires. Acceleration out of a stall or throttle movements made too quickly could flame out an engine entirely, a fatal problem at low altitude. Its greatest vulnerability came during takeoff and landing, when its jet engines produced little thrust at low speed and Allied fighters loitered specifically to attack it in these moments, destroying more Me-262s near their own airfields than in aerial combat. Pilots transitioning from propeller aircraft found its handling unforgiving and its margin for engine error non-existent. A revolutionary design undermined by immature engine technology and the strategic desperation that rushed it into service. Number 12. Fisher P-75 Eagle, United States, 1944. Conceived in the United States by assembling components from several existing aircraft to speed development, the P-75 Eagle was intended as a fast-climbing interceptor to counter high-altitude bomber threats. Its cobbled-together design proved aerodynamically compromised from the start, with poor stability and control response that made it difficult to fly predictably in any flight regime. Test pilots reported dangerous handling characteristics during evaluation, and several aircraft were lost or damaged during trials before the program's problems became undeniable. By the time development stalled, the bomber threat it was designed to counter had diminished, and better-performing fighters were already available in numbers. The Army Air Forces canceled the program after producing only a small number of aircraft, none of which reached combat. Pilots who tested it considered it a warning of what happens when a design is stitched together from other machines rather than engineered as a coherent whole, an aircraft that failed before it ever had the chance to fail in battle. Number 13. Messerschmitt Bf-109, Germany, 1937. Germany's Bf-109 became the backbone of the Luftwaffe fighter force, deployed from the Spanish Civil War through every major theater of the war, yet its narrow, inward-canted landing gear track remained a persistent flaw throughout its production life. The design placed the wheels close together beneath the fuselage, making the aircraft prone to violent ground loops on takeoff and landing, especially in crosswinds or on rough airstrips. Estimates suggest hundreds of aircraft were lost to landing accidents rather than combat, with young or fatigued pilots especially vulnerable during the war's final years as training hours shrank. Veteran pilots learned to compensate, but replacements thrown into combat with minimal instruction paid the price on their own airfields. The flaw was never redesigned across a decade of production because correcting it would have meant re-engineering the wing structure entirely. A legendary fighter in the air, it remained a hazard on the ground until the day it stopped flying. Number 14. Messerschmitt Bf-110, Germany, 1938. Conceived as a long-range heavy fighter capable of escorting bombers deep into enemy territory, Germany's Bf-110 was expected to dominate the skies over Britain during the Battle of Britain in 1940. Its size and weight, intended to carry heavy armament and fuel, made it far less agile than the single-engine Spitfires and Hurricanes it encountered, and it frequently needed fighter escorts of its own to survive daylight missions. During intense engagements that August and September, entire formations were cut apart by RAF fighters, exploiting its poor turning performance, with losses mounting so heavily that it was largely withdrawn from daylight escort duty over England. Pilots came to see the aircraft as a liability whenever committed against modern single-seat opposition. Its failure in this role forced the Luftwaffe to rethink bomber escort strategy entirely. Later redeployed as a night fighter, where its size and radar equipment became assets rather than weaknesses, the Bf-110 found the role its original design had never anticipated. Number 15. Heinkel He 112, Germany, 1938. Developed as Germany's alternative to the Bf-109 during pre-war fighter trials, the He-112 lost the competition but was still built in small numbers and exported to Spain, Romania, and Japan for evaluation and limited combat use. Its complicated inward retracting landing gear proved mechanically troublesome, prone to partial retraction failures that damaged aircraft on landing even without enemy involvement. Romanian pilots flying it against Soviet forces on the Eastern Front found it underpowered compared to newer Soviet fighters entering service by 1941, leaving them at a growing disadvantage as the war progressed. Its rejection by the Luftwaffe meant that spare parts and factory support were limited for the export operators who did receive it, compounding maintenance problems in the field. What began as a promising design lost to political and industrial decisions in Germany, then struggled again mechanically wherever it was sent to fight, never receiving the refinement needed to compete with frontline opposition. 16. Fiat CR-42 Falco, Italy, 1939. Italy entered the war still relying on the CR-42 Falco, a biplane fighter with fixed landing gear and, in many early examples, an open cockpit, at a time when other air forces had already moved to enclosed monoplane fighters. Sent north to join the Battle of Britain alongside German forces in late 1940, Italian pilots faced RAF Hurricanes in cold, high-altitude conditions their aircraft and open cockpits were never designed to endure. Its fixed gear and biplane drag capped its speed well below its opponents, leaving it unable to escape when intercepted, and several were shot down in short, one-sided engagements over England. Pilots who had trained on Mediterranean fronts found themselves outmatched in both aircraft and climate. Its failure in Northern Europe was a stark demonstration of how quickly aviation technology had advanced, leaving a design still respected in North Africa hopelessly obsolete in the skies, where it was needed to prove itself against a modern enemy. 17. Reggiane RE 2000, Italy, 1939. Italy's RE 2000 offered strong maneuverability and speed when it first flew, drawing comparisons to contemporary American fighters, but the Regia Aeronautica ultimately declined to order it in large numbers after inspectors raised concerns about its fuel tanks, which lacked self-sealing protection and sat close to the pilot without adequate separation. Structural engineers also worried about the thinness of its wing skin under combat loads and high-speed maneuvers. Rejected for the scale of production its performance seemed to deserve, most airframes were instead sold to Sweden and licensed to Hungary, where it was built as the Haja and flown on the Eastern Front. Hungarian pilots valued its handling, but remained aware that a well-placed hit near the fuel system could turn the aircraft into a fireball with little chance of survival. Its story became one of a genuinely capable design undermined by fuel system vulnerabilities its own home air force refused to accept. Number 18. PZL P-11, Poland, 1934. Poland's P-11 was an advanced design when it first entered service, notable for its gull-wing layout, but by the time Germany invaded in September 1939, its fixed landing gear, open cockpit, and modest speed left it badly outclassed by the Bf-109s and Bf-110s it was forced to face. Polish pilots, among the most skilled and determined of the war's opening weeks, still managed to shoot down a number of German aircraft through aggressive tactics and superior turning radius, but the campaign's air battles were fundamentally lopsided. Losses mounted quickly as German fighters simply outran and outclimbed their opponents whenever an engagement did not favor tight turning fights. Many aircraft were destroyed on the ground in the campaign's opening days before they could even contribute to the defense. Its failure was less a matter of design flaws than of a modern enemy arriving years ahead of Poland's ability to re-equip, a lesson in how quickly obsolescence could turn fatal. Number 19. Morane-Saulnier MS, 406, France, 1938. France's most numerous fighter at the outbreak of war, the M.S.406 was underpowered relative to the German fighters it would face, and its engine, armament, and control surfaces all fell short of the Bf-109E during the Battle of France in 1940. Its 20mm engine-mounted cannon suffered frequent jamming in combat, leaving pilots reliant on lighter machine guns against better-armed and faster opponents. Formations of M.S.406S engaging German fighters over France often found themselves unable to outclimb, outrun, or outgun their attackers, and losses during the 6-week campaign were severe. Pilots reported the frustration of closing on enemy bombers only to have their primary weapon fail at the critical moment. Its failure during France's collapse became emblematic of a wider unpreparedness in French aircraft production during the interwar years. Exported examples continued to serve with other air forces afterward, but in French service its combat record was defined by the speed of its country's defeat. Number 20. Fokker D XXI, Netherlands, 1938. The Netherlands entered the war with the fixed-gear radial engine D XXI as its primary fighter, an aircraft already approaching obsolescence when Germany launched its invasion in May 1940. Dutch pilots nonetheless inflicted losses on German transport aircraft and bombers during the brief campaign, exploiting the type's tight turning ability before being overwhelmed by superior numbers and more modern opposition within days. Its low speed and light armament left it unable to challenge Bf 109s directly, and much of the Dutch fighter force was destroyed on the ground or lost within the campaign's first 72 hours. The same design, exported earlier to Finland, found a longer and more effective career flying against Soviet aircraft during the Winter War, where its opponents were comparably matched. In Dutch hands during 1940, however, it faced an enemy operating years ahead in aircraft development, and its failure was sealed before the campaign had truly begun. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button for more military history and aviation content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.